Before there were two, there was one, Virginia, a colossal territory stretching from the Atlantic coast deep into the heart of the continent. But this singular name masked a profound and growing division, a fracture line carved not by politicians, but by the very land itself. The story of how Virginia split into two is not just a footnote of the Civil War. It's a centuries-long saga of two vastly different worlds, separated by the formidable spine of the Allegheny Mountains. To understand the split, we must go back to the beginning. Eastern Virginia, the Tidewater and Piedmont regions, was settled first. English aristocrats and planters established a society modeled on the one they left behind. Their economy was built on a single lucrative crop, tobacco, and that crop was cultivated by a system of brutal chattel slavery. This created immense wealth, a powerful planter class, and a political structure centered in Richmond that served their interests almost exclusively. Life revolved around the Grand Plantation, the county court, and the flow of capital to and from Europe. West of the mountains, a completely different Virginia was taking shape. This was the frontier, settled by hardy, independent Scots, Irish, German, and other European immigrants. They weren't seeking to build sprawling estates. They were looking for a small plot of land to call their own. They were subsistence farmers, hunters, and artisans. Their world was one of log cabins, dense forests, and tight-knit, isolated communities. They had little in common with the powdered wigs and political maneuvering of Richmond. Slavery had little economic foothold here. The rugged terrain and small-scale farming didn't support the plantation model. For decades, this geographical and cultural divide festered into a deep political resentment. The western counties felt like a colony of the East. Their tax dollars flowed over the mountains to fund canals, roads, and universities that they would never use. The political system was deliberately skewed. Representation in the General Assembly was based on a formula that heavily favored the slaveholding eastern counties, giving them disproportionate power. Voting rights were often tied to land ownership, disenfranchising many of the poorer western farmers. This tension boiled over at the Constitutional Convention of 1829-30. Western delegates fought passionately for reforms, for equal representation and universal white male suffrage. They argued that they were being governed without their consent. But the Eastern planter elite, fearing a loss of their power and a threat to the institution of slavery, blocked any meaningful change. The West left the convention feeling betrayed and marginalized. Another attempt at reform was made in 1851. This time, the West won some concessions, including the popular election of the governor and the removal of property qualifications for voting. But the fundamental issue of unequal representation, which still counted enslaved people to bolster the East's power, remained. The compromise was a bandage on a gaping wound. The two Virginias were drifting further apart, and a single cataclysmic issue would soon make reconciliation impossible. In October 1859, the abolitionist John Brown launched his fateful raid on the Federal Armory at Harper's Ferry, located in what is now West Virginia. His plan to incite a massive slave rebellion failed, but the event sent shockwaves across the nation. In Eastern Virginia, it was seen as an act of terror, confirming their worst fears about Northern aggression and the threat to their way of life. It pushed them further down the path of secession. But in the West, the reaction was more complex. While few supported Brown's violent methods, the raid and its aftermath starkly illuminated the chasm between them and the East. The crisis was no longer abstract. It was on their doorstep. The election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860 was the final straw. As Southern states began to secede, Virginia convened a special convention in Richmond in February 1861 to decide its fate. Initially, a majority of delegates, including many from the West, were pro-Union and voted against secession. But then came the firing on Fort Sumter, and Lincoln's call for 75,000 volunteers to put down the rebellion. For the Eastern elite, this was an act of war, a federal invasion of their sister Southern states. The mood in Richmond shifted dramatically. On April 17, 1861, the convention voted 88-55 to approve an ordinance of secession. The Western delegates were outraged. They saw secession as an act of treason, a betrayal of the United States, and a move that served only the interests of the slave-owning aristocracy. They declared the ordinance illegal, as it had not been put to a popular vote, and stormed out of the convention. Returning home, they immediately began to organize. While the rest of Virginia was saying goodbye to the U.S., the western counties decided it was time to say goodbye to Virginia. In a series of meetings known as the Wheeling Conventions, delegates from the Unionist counties laid the groundwork for a new state. It was a brilliant and audacious political maneuver. At the Second Wheeling Convention in June 1861, they argued that by seceding, the state officials in Richmond had abdicated their offices. The delegates then formed a new pro-Union government for the entire state of Virginia, known as the Restored Government of Virginia, with Francis H. Pierpont as its governor. This government was quickly recognized by Washington as the legitimate government of Virginia. This was the crucial step. The U.S. Constitution requires a state's legislature to consent to the formation of a new state from its territory. The restored government, now acting as Virginia's official legislature, promptly gave its own western counties permission to separate. It was a legal and constitutional masterstroke, a workaround that allowed the West to break away while technically following the letter of the law. With this permission in hand, the leaders of the statehood movement took their case to the U.S. Congress. The debate in Washington was intense. Some questioned the constitutionality of the restored government, but the strategic value of adding a new Union state was undeniable. A key condition was added. The new state must include a provision for the gradual emancipation of all enslaved people within its borders. This was known as the Willey Amendment. After much debate, the West Virginia Statehood Bill passed both houses of Congress. The final decision rested with President Lincoln. He consulted his cabinet, who were deeply divided on the matter. Lincoln himself wrestled with the constitutionality, but ultimately, expediency won. He saw the creation of West Virginia as a powerful blow against the Confederacy. On December 31, 1862, he signed the bill. On June 20, 1863, right in the heart of the Civil War, West Virginia was officially admitted to the Union as the 35th state. A new star, born of rebellion against rebellion, was added to the American flag. The war's end did not end the disputes. Virginia, once it was readmitted to the Union, sued West Virginia over its share of the pre-war state debt. The legal battle, Virginia v. West Virginia, went all the way to the Supreme Court and dragged on for half a century. In the decades that followed, the two states walked starkly different paths. West Virginia's economy became dominated by coal, steel, and industry, leading to a history of intense labor struggles and boom and bust cycles. Virginia's economy diversified, with its eastern half rebuilding its agricultural base and its northern region transforming into a bustling suburb of the nation's capital. Today, the two states retain their distinct identities, forged in that centuries-long divide. West Virginia, the mountain state, holds a fierce pride in its unique origins and rugged Appalachian culture. Virginia, the Old Dominion, grapples with its complex legacy, a state that is at once the cradle of the nation and the heart of the Confederacy. The split of Virginia was not a sudden divorce, but a slow, inevitable separation. It was the culmination of generations of cultural friction, economic disparity, and political struggle, all amplified by the chasm of the mountains. So the next time you look at a map of the United States, remember the line that divides Virginia from West Virginia. State lines aren't just lines. They are the scars of history. They are stories of division, rebellion, and the enduring quest for identity. They are the final chapter in a long, complicated, and truly American story.